Okay, we are going to number 8, which is report on teacher value added measures. Ryan?
We just got these from the state. It's a little bit complicated, but I'm promising it'll be easy. But I wanted Ryan to do a presentation to kind of let you understand where we are.
Sure. This afternoon, I just want to provide you with a brief update on where we are on the 2011-12 evaluation score cycle and providing teachers with those final evaluation scores, and then also provide you with an update on the teacher evaluation committee, the plan and timeline that was decided at the last meeting on how to roll those scores out. The purpose tonight, I'm trying not to get into technical aspects, the calculations, because it's so individualized. This is more of an informative, how we plan to roll these scores out, what the timeline is, and how we plan to get that information to principals and teachers. We have received the final value-added scores from Tallahassee. About the past two and a half weeks, we've been processing those data files along with our local data, and we do have final evaluation scores on teachers at this time. We've spent the last week and a half validating the scores, reviewing them. The teacher evaluation committee has seen an aggregated, they haven't seen individual scores, but they've seen aggregated results from those files. And we met on October 10th and developed a timeline to roll those scores out, as well as a web-based application to get those scores to the teacher. In the next few slides, what we'll do is walk you through what that web-based application will look like, so you'll have an idea of what the teachers and principals will be seeing when we turn those scores on. The target date at this time is November 1st at 8 a.m. That is when we will turn the switch on, and we're going to have a few informational sessions prior to doing that, so it's not a, throwing something in a cold water or hot cup of coffee in your face kind of thing.
So instead of like traditionally, your boss sitting down with you and telling you what your score is, people are going to log in and see where they rank compared to everybody else?
There'll be no comparison on rankings, right? My understanding is they've already seen their observation scores, and they've met with the principals on that aspect. What we've been waiting on is the state to send us the student data piece so we can finalize their evaluation from that point
They
on.
won't be sitting down with a person.
Okay,
to
this
do
is
that.
on data from last year. They
Right,
have seen
right.
their observation and their evaluation information from last year. What they're getting now is their VAM scores from last year.
From FCAT
So,
or-
yeah, that adds
Right.
it all into one package. We had a release on these VAM scores last year. It's just we put it out the week before Christmas, and that was a little bit disconcerting to people. So we're going to he's going to brief the principals tomorrow, he's briefing y'all tonight, and so we're going to take it kind of a little bit slower.
If you look, everybody should have a copy of the slides. I'm on the second slide now. When teachers come in on November 1st, they'll log into their PAWS account, which is traditionally how they'll access their grade book. We'll post messages out there, student dashboard. And what they'll see is they'll see a new tab called Student Performance. Principals will be able to, principals will see it as well as instructional personnel. And once they click on that, the tab, the Student Performance tab, it'll take you to, they will go to the next slide, and what you see there is what a principal will see. This is what a principal will see at their school, their instructional personnel. And the information they'll see the employee's name, what we call factor, the infamous factor that's been floating around for a year and a half now. And that is the factor that is derived from the state's calculation and our local calculation. And what that does is that translates into a point value of 0 to 300. So they'll see the factor, what we call the SPS, Student Performance Score, the points associated with that. Then they'll see the points they received on their observation, and then they'll see the total number of points. So if they had 200 points on the SPS, 200 points on the observation, their total evaluation is 400. And then what we also show them is what that translates to in terms of highly effective, developing needs improvement. On the principal view, and it's hard to see on the screen, but on the right-hand side there's a grid, and what that shows is the data sets that were used to calculate somebody's score, whether it be the state value-added score, DEA scores, local FCAT scores, end-of-course exams, AP, IBAs, and they can, it's hard to say again, they can hover over the, and there's a legend that will pop up when they hover over. On page 2 of your slide packet, there's the secondary teacher summary view. this is what a teacher will actually see when they log in. This will be when they click on their score, this will be what they see. And one of the reasons we went with this web-based application is if, one, it's a ease of deployment in terms of getting it to the teacher quickly and efficiently. The second thing is it's more confidential in nature because it's tied to a teacher's user ID and password. We're not emailing out lists to principals that may get lost or printed and put on somebody's desk. So we're trying to get it to them quickly, efficiently, and keep it confidential at the same time. And it also allows us, it allows the teacher to drill down to their data sets. They can look at it and say, instead of just seeing a number, they can see, okay, how do we get that number? Okay, what students are associated with that number? And if you look at that slide, you can see that there's a breakdown on that teacher. They'll see an overall factor, just like a principal will, their overall evaluation score. But then underneath it, there's a second box, and then a box underneath it, and there's a state value added box that says, okay, this is your factor associated with your value added score. Then it drops down if they have end of course exam data, then we're showing them, okay, this is your factor associated with your end of course exam data also. So we're trying to leave no stone unturned, so we're not, so they're not guessing, how'd you get that score? What students were associated with my score? What courses did you use? We're trying to give them as much information as possible. If you look at the next slide, you can drill down a little bit more. What they'll see is the number of students that are associated with a particular course. In this example, we're looking at an Algebra 2 course. And if that teacher clicks on the number of students, we'll display the actual students that were included in their calculation. In this case, it's an end-of-course exam, so you're looking at the pass rate for that teacher. And then it also shows the district pass rate as well, so they can use that as a comparison. And they can replicate that with any course that they have under their account. Similar concept with an elementary teacher. They'll see the same thing, except it may be DEA scores or FCAT scores or whatever it may be. But it's a similar concept. I just wanted you to have a snapshot of what an elementary teacher will see also. When you look at the detail view on page 3 of your packet, next to the last slide, it's a similar concept. The elementary teachers can click on the student or the number of students, and it'll show the average gain for those students. Then it'll also show the average gains for that particular course for that individual teacher. Then they can see the average district gains as well. So we're trying to give them as much information as possible to allow them, so we're trying to take all the guesswork out of it. As I stated earlier, November 1st is our target date for releasing the scores. What we did not want to do is just turn on the application without telling principals, without informing teachers. So what the committee proposed is I will present the same information to the principals tomorrow at the principals meeting on the 23rd. And then we're going to hold 3 technical assistance meetings for teachers across the county, October 24th, 29th, and 31st. And the primary focus will be navigating this application, giving them a heads up that, hey, this is going to be turned on November 1st, 8 a.m. This is how you access your score. This is how you interpret it. This is what you can do with it. You can look at it. If you have an issue with it, call us. We're here to help you. So we're trying to release it to them as quickly as possible, but efficiently as possible also. So principals aren't bombarded with questions. You guys aren't bombarded with questions. We're not bombarded. So we're trying to get as much information out there as quick as possible.
All right, Ryan, while you're there, Karen, or you and Greg, do y'all feel comfortable with what we're hearing? Now's a great time to decide.
Totally. I feel very comfortable with what Ryan and his partner have done. They've done a phenomenal job. But there has to be an asterisk next to it that the state has even acknowledged that the data that they've sent us is flawed and cannot be verified as reliable. And luckily, on the front end of this, the evaluation committee was very generous in the cut scores that we gave. So we're in essence holding people harmless, that it doesn't really matter. But you've got to acknowledge, and there really needs to be some public acknowledgement that what the state has given you is not good data.
Okay, Ryan, I know y'all work together. In other words, let's be sure everybody's on the same page. That's all we should all be on the same page, and so let's hope that we make sure we're there, okay?
Well, and that's nothing that anybody here could do anything
We've
about.
coordinated this with the teachers and Karen.
Right, but Dr. Tibbetts, I do think it behooves the school board or yourself to acknowledge that we've heard from Juan Copa from the state that what they've sent us is not necessarily valid data for every teacher.
Well, I'll
And that-
depend, Karen, I'll depend on Ryan and the superintendent, the new superintendent, to whatever needs to make sure that whatever we do, we're all on the same page and not hollering and screaming at each other. So Ryan, I'm depending on you to
Do
take
they hope
care
to
of it.
correct that, Karen?
No, I think what they've sent us is, it has been reanalyzed to the best that they could, but it's a first year, it's a first shot. I mean, nobody, I think, expected it, but I think we have to acknowledge it. And so that when we have teachers question, or the paper, or whomever, the public, that this was nothing that anybody within Okaloosa County could have prevented or changed, but it was legislated, and it's not there yet. And as long as we're not penalizing teachers, which I think the evaluation committee did a good job to be sure that the cut scores were set high enough, but there again, when you have the opportunity to look at how teachers, how their scores played out into whether they were highly effective, that's not accurate either, because we're just not there. And as long as we all acknowledge that what we're putting out is our best effort at this first shot at it, and that we're not getting rid of teachers, and we're not saying that teachers are ineffective based on this data.
And Ryan, I'm sure you up to speed with them and know where we need to go, right?
Sure, and I want to thank Greg and Karen. We've had many long meetings and afternoons, and I think we're on the same page in terms of, we know that we're not there yet. And I think what DOE, and she's referencing, you can correct me if I'm wrong, when they calculate their value-added data, they say there's a standard error rate when we calculate this. They'll admit that.
Yeah.
You know, they'll stand up there and say, there's an error rate in this calculation. So they can't stand up and say, you know, we'll bet our house on it. We'll bet.
Right.
And so that's where your play comes into, you know, how valid is this information? And anytime you send data back and forth and you let some third-party vendor make a prediction on a score based on a student's demographics or whatever it may be, there's going to be an error rate. You cannot 100% predict it. And so this year, with it being the baseline, you know, I think the committee did a good job on setting the scores, trying to hold it home, because this is just the baseline year.
Right.
For the state too, and defense of the state, they have a tough task also. So,
Well, when you say you set the scores, does that mean next year the scores may be higher?
on the cut scores, in
On the
terms
cut
of, we might
scores.
say this year, for example, 400 is highly effective.
Right.
Well, next year it may be 450, you know, because we're looking at the
Which that's a
data.
natural,
Sure, and the state will, and eventually the state's going to, what they're telling us, they're
Right.
going to take that from us and say, we're going to set the cut score at some
Yeah.
point.
Okay.
Because they'll only have so much money to go around
Right.
10 years, you know, 5 years down
In
the
a
road.
range that does the least harm.
Right.
Kind of like we did on the end-of-course exams with the standards.
But I mean, it's hard to compare, you know, because there is the state part of the calculation, there's, you know, what the evaluation committee or local part of the calculation. So when the state does take that over, I mean, it's hard to compare, especially as we all
Right.
transition over to end-of-course exams and mandated end-of-course exams. And, I mean, it's even hard to compare, you know, I don't know if our principals all have the opportunity to look at, like, well, how many highly effective, you know, what was our highly effective or low-performing teacher population at this school compared to mine? Well, I mean, there's so many, you know, certain things aren't even offered at one school that they're offered at another school. Courses, subjects, demographics of the student population, and so it's hard to compare, you know,
Well, the main-
within our district and
the main
compared to other
thing, Karen,
districts.
is I think, according to you and Ryan both, is y'all been working real close together on this thing, and hopefully, as we all understand, with the kind of the mess the whole thing's in from the state back, but I mean, I think that at least we've made a lot of progress for the fact that both of you said that you feel like y'all have been working fairly close together to make sure that everyone knows where we are and on the same page.
And the
I
three
feel
meetings you're
comfortable with
having,
that.
is this going to be north, central, and south?
Yes.
And this is voluntary, and they,
Strictly voluntary. We're going to do one at Crestview, one in Niceville, and then one at Fort Walton.
and Karen, are you going to be a part of that as far as just so we've got your face as far as-
Probably so, and
Or the
especially,
committee.
I mean, it needs to, I mean, I will want to reiterate again that that the state is not standing behind, probably a little bit more forceful than what Ryan is able to do. That, you know, we have a lot of districts that are opting out of using the state's data this time, or are moving towards that. But again, we covered ourselves on the front end by setting our cut scores high enough that teachers wouldn't be harmed by data that was not accurate, and by evaluators who were new to something. I mean, we purposely, so when and if someone looks at how our teachers performed, they need to keep in mind that we knew there were a tremendous number of variables that could negatively impact teachers, and we were trying to prevent that. So the committee is working as best as it can under less than stellar circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Ryan?